Hey, Olivia, thanks for joining us today. As we're getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Hey, Brian. First of all, thank you so much for having me on today. So my name's Olivia. I am originally from outside of Boston and I live in New York City. Started in sales as a field seller selling cybersecurity portfolio at IBM. So started doing that and then transitioned over to a startup company selling cybersecurity as well, and recently made the move into a leadership position. So now we'll be managing a mid-market team at my current company.
Cool. And being at IBM and then going to a startup, I did the opposite. I'm sure because I met obviously a ton of reps at IBM. It has a different view of sales, doesn't it? Since you have a huge brand, good or bad, behind you.
Okay.
What was that like?
So first of all, taking a step back, I had always been interested in startups in general
Yeah.
throughout my life and been really fascinated, had worked at startups, fascinated by the growth, just entrepreneurship in general. So I knew that at some point I wanted to get into a startup. As most people say, I'm sure, I kind of fell into sales. I didn't, it was an accident. I'm very glad it happened, but the opportunity at IBM to get the kind of training that I did was, it was phenomenal. I had essentially a 9-month training program, and I learned kind of that big company processes, how to sell, how to qualify. But it was so different now where I'm at. But especially because moving to a startup, the reason I wanted to was to go kind of build and implement and kind of bring my own processes and have more of an impact. So I think it was challenging, yes, but it was something that I actively sought out. So I actively decided, hey, I want to go to as early stage of a startup as I can possibly go to for that
Yeah.
reason.
And which brand were you in the security? Was it
I was in
Tivoli?
security.
Yeah.
Yes. I was in the cybersecurity software portfolio at IBM.
Okay. And what did you like about that?
About cybersecurity specifically?
Yeah. Or, because it's so broad and deep.
Yeah.
And did you cover IBM accounts or was it Greenfield?
So it was primarily white space accounts, but
Oh,
the really unique thing about starting was at IBM, you could start and have some of the largest corporations in the world, but because they didn't spend a lot of money with IBM in the other business units, I had the opportunity to be working some like Fortune 100 or Fortune 500 companies and just trying to crack in. So I think I loved being in cybersecurity, and I sought out cybersecurity because of my experience that I had briefly interned in the VC space. I had seen cybersecurity startups taking off. I said, okay, this is a place that I really want to get deep into. And then what I liked about it was we had a portfolio of, I don't know, like 15 SaaS products. And so it wasn't a question of going to a client and being like, are you here for this one product? It's, I can pretty much solve all your problems. So let's try and understand at the deepest level which bucket you might fit into and then go from
yeah.
there. So it was very consultative.
And what was that first year like at the startup?
At the startup,
Yeah.
um, so I was one of the first AEs hired. So I was my director of sales, first hire. And it was like greenfield. Like I was like covering half the country, but also Europe and also part of Canada. And it was, companies of all different sizes. And I just kind of had to figure it out.
Yeah.
And I had never had that kind of experience at IBM. It was, this is relatively your defined territory. Like,
Yeah.
especially my last year at IBM, it was, here are 20 accounts. This is it. Here it was, you have the world or part of the world, and go figure it out and then build from there. And so it was all building processes, how are we going to, qualify? What is our sales methodology? How are we going to bring a new product to market in a completely new space? So it's great, but it was very different.
It sounds a little overwhelming. Or how did you view it? As a great adventure or scary? Or
Yeah, it was, I woke up one day at IBM and I was like, this has been fantastic. I need to be re-energized.
yeah.
And I really enjoy building things. Like I always, even before early in my life, I was like, I want to be, the founder of a company. I have all these ideas. I don't know if that's going to happen or if I want to, but the idea of like going into something that is a completely blank whiteboard and then like filling it up and whiteboarding with my ideas and seeing what works, that was really exciting to me. So it was overwhelming and I failed and I made mistakes and things worked, but like when you figure out something that works, it's so rewarding. So that was kind of the first, it was definitely overwhelming, but in a good way, I would say.
And tell me about like your first success, your first significant deal. Or one of them. Doesn't have to be the first one. It
I
could
would
be.
say, yeah, actually, not to shout out your course, but you really helped me, and we talked through some of the deals that I was working that were really critical. And one of them was, I would say, my first big win was a company that was, I think, the first outbound meeting I had set at the company, or one of the first. And we got to the right people and they were the right fit and they were just so excited by our technology, but they didn't have the budget and we couldn't figure out a way. But after kind of dissecting that point where there was no budget, we realized like we didn't have a strong enough case. We didn't have a strong enough business case here. So I really lost the deal in kind of December of that year, where they were like, we can't move forward with you. And looking back, there were many reasons why, things that I could have done better. So when I had a shot in, January or February to go back and have a conversation, I was able to uncover, okay, there is, a pain in an initiative, and there's something that's taking, upwards of $500,000 a year to do manually that we're going to be able to automate. And then having that kind of loss and then seeing what worked, what didn't work, and then being able to identify, okay, we can solve this problem and we have to sell it in this way. It was super rewarding, and it ended up being a really exciting deal for the company and for me.
Cool. And that was a cold outbound
That was
deal?
cool outbound.
Now, I got to imagine having half the world or a third of the world that you'd get enough inbound. Is that the company wasn't mature enough to have inbound, or the inbound wasn't really a good match?
We did not have inbound at the time. So it is outbound. I am a outbound machine. So yes, it was all outbound because we're introducing a new category essentially.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of overlap with other categories. This is in the application security space, but it really is a completely new approach. So no one has this as a budgeted line item or as a project, so it's all outbound.
And what was the hardest part of the sale?
This is a good question. I would say after we got the technical win, but we didn't get the business win. And the hardest point was like that discrepancy where it should have happened simultaneously. And I thought that, okay, because we have the technical win, that means we're going to keep the momentum and keep things moving and then get the business win. But at the end of the day, we didn't have the right people aware. We didn't have the alignment to the executives' objectives and initiatives. We didn't have a lot of things missing there. In that process of like getting the business win was probably the most difficult, I would say.
Yeah. And how about the contrast between selling for a huge company and then selling for a early stage Series B or A, was it?
At the time, it was Series A. I would say that a big part of that was education.
Yeah.
And that was not the case at IBM, right? Because it was identity and access management, it was SIM, it was, data security, it was things that people actually, knew they needed and were maybe replacing other products. But at this company, it's really a process of education on a new approach. But in order to do that education, it requires understanding a pain so deeply that they might know they have the pain, they might not, but they might really probably don't know that there's a solution to solving that pain.
Yeah. And so tell us about that cold outbound. Was it emails, phone calls,
This
everything?
email, this was a very targeted email where I had listened to a podcast, or I had read an article, I believe, actually, that he wrote, and I quoted the article in the subject line and got the meeting.
Yeah. And then how'd you build interest?
So having the first meeting, something that I've realized is just really critical is identifying it. Is this the actual right person? And then how do we the right person? He was not at the time the right person,
Yeah.
unfortunately, but he did get us to the right person. And I'm very fortunate with this company that I work for, where the technology is something that captures the attention of the right person off the bat. So in the first meeting, this was like, wow, this is a really new, novel concept. This is something that I really think this other team could benefit from. But being able to then actually get to the right person and make sure that meeting happens and understand what the other person cares about, it lined up in this situation, which it doesn't always do.
No.
But a big part of it was like the timing of, we have this pain, but we don't know that there's a solution that can solve it. So we met with them and we identified that, and we're able to highlight that we could solve that and highlight the pain.
And how did it turn out differently than you had anticipated? Because you were at a big company, you were doing well, you had it down, and then you go to a startup and everyone's figuring it out.
Yeah. How did the startup turn out differently than I anticipated?
Yeah,
Or
because you go in and you're like, you probably thought, well, maybe I'll call on my old customers, people I know,
I did.
right? So,
Unfortunately,
and after what, 2 days or
yeah.
2 weeks, or
Try.
maybe like, okay, I got a third of the world. How do I prioritize this? You don't call everybody. Start at A.
Yeah. I think first of all, what you said, it turned out differently. I didn't really understand I prospected a lot and I did a lot of outbound when I was at IBM, but I had the kind of small subset of accounts that were large names but and I could sometimes get in with the IBM name. But then coming here, I didn't really understand like cold calling and how much time is needed, and how I kind of had this notion of, wow, I've successfully broken into like 70% of my territory at points when I was at IBM. That's what I'm going to do when I get to this next company. And then I come and I'm like, this is really hard. Like, it doesn't matter in some scenarios, if I'm writing the perfect customized short email, it still won't get through. And I think that was something that I came in thinking that I'd be able to.
And
Yeah.
what kept you going? I mean, because I'm sure after the first 2 or 3 months, you're like, oh, this is an adventure, but you probably weren't having the success that you anticipated, or
I think what actually kept me going was that I was having
you
success.
were.
because I was able to book the meetings. I mean, the activity required, like I was prospecting nonstop for the first however many months. That was my job. But what kept me going was like, oh, this does work, you know, and getting those meetings like this one, and then getting on call where they're like, wow. And then seeing a deal progress is really exciting from something starting in that way.
Yeah. And were you surprised at how complex the deals were?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Because just getting somebody excited about the technology is one thing. Getting them to buy it is a whole nother thing. And then getting it higher on the priority list is pretty hard.
The priority list is very hard. I think that one thing that surprised me too is that I figured, okay, I'm going from having a very large portfolio where I have to really figure out which product is going to be a fit, which project aligns to which product I'm selling. And then in this at this company, I was like, oh, this is one product, so it's going to be simpler. And it wasn't at all. It was probably even more consultative, because it's just understanding which, there are many use cases we can solve for, but really narrowing down, okay, which problem are they looking to solve that needs to be solved now, that's enough so that someone's going to fund this. And that's really hard, because it takes a long time to actually figure out what that pain is and if it will be funded, and then match it to that part of what we're selling, that part of the product.
Yeah. And now you had this latent pain that you had to create to make it active pain, to get the technical sale, and then to get the business sale.
Yeah, once you get the technical win, that's great. I mean, I made so many mistakes at the beginning with getting the technical win, but then that's great. But this is not number one. This is not number two. This is not number three on the priority list. You know,
Yeah.
so much time was spent learning those lessons.
And was the whole company figuring this out, or so you didn't really have something to build off of?
Right, because we were moving from, founder-led sales to me being one of the first people as an AE. We had nothing to go off of. We were starting, to build it out and figure out, okay, so it started with, let's get as many POCs as possible. And then it was like, wait, that was a lot of time we spent on this POC that really wasn't going to move forward. What could we have figured out before moving to the POC to make it our decision? Do we really want to spend our time here?
So it was really about judgment versus activity.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And did you get pushback from leadership about that, or meaning
no, we're all in it together, trying to figure it out together. So that's one of the really amazing things about startups, and at least the stage that I was at, is we were all kind of a team. Like, all right, how are we going to approach these next 3 months? And we're all a team, so it's really selling together, getting on calls together, figuring this out together, learning lessons together, pivoting together.
And how did you keep your motivation up during because sometimes there were peaks, there were some valleys. I remember some valleys that,
I think one of the things that I'm very motivated by I'm very goal oriented, and I'm motivated by hitting goals. So the way that I keep my motivation up is by having achievable goals. So if I said I'm going to close 50 deals in 3 months, and that's my goal, that's not going to happen. So it had to be, I'm going to get 2 meetings this week. But when you achieve that, then I'm motivated. I'm like, I'm fired up. That worked, and that meeting went well. So I feel like I was able to keep it up. Yes, there were weeks that were really frustrating. Yes, when we lost deals, that was really frustrating. But then I had to just go back. Okay, I lost this deal, but I need to establish my goals, my very micro goals. What are they? And I'm going to hit them. Okay, next week, I'm going to hit these goals. And that's what helped me keep the motivation.
And what do you think your strongest selling characteristic is?
I think that this is a good question. I think that my strongest selling characteristic is the ability to uncover the pain, but then to understand if it will be actioned on and if it will be funded.
Yeah.
But just to keep digging and keep finding the right people in the company that feel a certain pain and then getting deeper.
Yeah. You know, having worked with you, your ability to focus was, I think, certainly helped you do that because you were laser focused on these deals.
I get maniacally focused on but this actually has been really challenging for me because I can be relentless about deals. I went on this deal, but there are certain times where at the beginning of my career, I made a lot of mistakes with like being so focused on deals that weren't actually the right.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that we talked a lot about working together. And you helped me think through, is this deal worth my time? And the deals that we were working on together, thankfully they closed, but I had to think through all of the questions that we talked about because there were points in those deals where I was about to disqualify them. And then I went back to my team and I said, I don't think we should be spending our time on this. And then I went even to the customer sometimes and I said, I don't know that this is worth your time and my time. But those conversations led to closed deals.
And it's crazy. I just got off an interview where someone was mentioning that transparency, asking those hard questions that you're thinking, but you're not asking.
Absolutely.
And you kind of get almost out of the rep mode and more into the partner in crime mode. It's like, you know, is this really that important to you guys?
100%. Like, I'm a person, you're a person. We only have 24 hours in a day. Do we want to spend it with each other or do we not?
Trying to solve this thing. Is it really that bad?
Yeah.
Well, I think that surfaced a lot of honesty and a lot of motives.
It does. People
What would
just
you
appreciate. Oh, sorry. What were you saying?
Well, what would you have done differently if you had to do that year over again?
Learn to focus on the right deals and prospects earlier, I guess. Yeah. I don't know that there's anything I would have done differently.
Really? Yeah.
I know. I think every lesson that I learned from every deal was something that I can look at a deal that's closed and been like, that led to the reason I closed this deal. And it is really frustrating in the moment, but I don't think I could have closed this massive deal that I just closed without learning, 2 years ago that I blew it with this deal and it wasn't going to close and I spent 3 months on it, things like that.
Yeah. So today, when you look at deals, do you have like the sixth sense about seeing the future, where you like look at the deal? And if you have that, that's good.
I can't say I have that, but I think I have a good feeling on where it's worth spending our time, and if it's not, and if I don't know, then it's just about asking the right questions and just going back to what you were saying before. It's just being super direct with the person on the other side of the Zoom and just being like, listen, this is, let's have an honest conversation. At the end of the day, we're just people trying to figure out where to spend our time and how to solve problems. So,
yeah. And how'd you come to that realization? Because a lot of people keep the sales face and the sales voice and the script and, the follow-up instead of getting into the real report, not about the weather and sports, but what's really going to happen here.
I think I as a person, just like in my life, I don't really have a tolerance for a lot of like I like very direct. I like let's get down to it. And I don't know who you are and I want you to know who I am. And if we like each other, that's amazing. And if we don't, oh no, we'll just move on. And that's how I am in life. And I think starting in my career, it took me some time to realize like this can actually be applied in work too. But then when I got a level of confidence in as myself as a seller, I was like, wait, I can be I can be who I am in my sales role as I am in my life.
Yeah. And you always been that way, or is that a New York City addition to your personality?
I like that. I think I've always been that way.
Yeah, well, that's
I
good.
think.
Well, I
I mean,
think
it works for some people. It doesn't work for
it
everyone,
doesn't
but
work with
it's just,
everybody, but it's not curt or rude. It's just direct and honest.
yeah. I like building relationships with people where it's super authentic and I don't feel like I have to put energy into being something else, or people don't have to feel like that with me.
And what do you think? What characteristic do you think or skill would take your game to the next level?
I think that this is a good question. I think probably thinking just about negotiations in general. Um, I could probably step up in that area, having those conversations, knowing I just looking back at my deals, I think that there are probably times where I, discounted and didn't need to, or I was just too afraid of losing, where um, I didn't kind of hold price integrity. And I think that that's an area where I look at it and I think, okay, I could really work on this, and this would, yeah, we've talked about this too, like, if you do a good enough of a job with the sales process and the business case, they're going to pay whatever it is to solve this problem, right? And it's just, I think that's a skill that I
Yeah.
want to work on.
And if you were to build the perfect salesperson, what would the ingredients be?
From an attribute standpoint or a skill
Yeah.
standpoint?
Yeah, like say somebody came to you and they said, I want to be great at sales. They want to be on your team. And I'll do whatever you tell me. I'll work 80 hours a week.
Yeah.
How would you coach them? What would you say? Okay, do this first, do this, then do this.
I think the first thing is just the raw. So I'm in the process right now of actually building out a team and thinking through that a lot. So this is something I think about a lot. And I think for me, from an attribute standpoint, what I look at in someone is, grit and drive and an ability to be resilient, and to be, I think that as just a quality in general is something I really look for. And if you have that drive and grit, then thinking about prioritization and focus, like what we were talking about before.
Yeah.
Number one, your territory. Number two, who are you targeting? Where are you spending your time? Is it worth your time? Like asking those questions every single minute that you are prospecting and running deals and things like that. That's huge.
It is. Yeah, because certainly if you have a third of the country, you could go on a lot of wild goose chases.
Yeah.
People willing to
Absolutely.
talk to you without the need or the want.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Exactly. And a lot of people just want to check out cool new tech,
Sure.
want to try it out.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not in the business of that. So
You want
we can't
deals.
do that. Yeah, I would love to, but it needs to have an outcome and it needs to be worth both of our time. So I think that's what I would kind of coach on.
And how about, the people who are listening who are at a big brand company and they're thinking of going to a startup and they're wondering, is it the thing for them?
Yeah.
What would you tell them?
you have to think a lot about if you're comfortable in an environment where you have to be figuring a lot of things out on your own and then actually be making decisions on your own. If you're someone who really needs a lot of validation in order to make a decision, or likes really built out processes and is uncomfortable about the idea of having that like blank slate, then it might not be the right decision. But I think that you can grow so quickly and at a startup where you have the opportunity to build those skills and kind of get thrown in doing things that you don't know how to do. And you're just kind of like, I gotta go for it. And I think I recommend it to anyone, but I know it's not the right fit for everyone.
Yeah. Cool. Hey, I really appreciate catching up with you. Where can people go to connect and follow you?
So you can follow me on LinkedIn. It's Olivia Shapiro. Yeah, I think